The main thing that I learned about conspiracy theory is that conspiracy theorists believe in conspiracy because that is more comforting. The truth of the world is that it is actually chaotic. The truth is that it is not the Illuminati or the Jewish banking conspiracy or the gray alien theory. The truth is far more frightening. Nobody is in control. All right. Welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. What do we got today? If you've been following what we like to call Big Conservative Inc. or Conservative Inc., this is basically all the conservative podcasters. You've got like Ben Shapiro, and you've basically the folks over at the Daily Wire, right? Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Candace Owens, so on and so forth, right? Well, there's a big shakeup with Candace Owens. I talked about it just yesterday on my podcast. Kind of went through her conversation with a rabbi, and I'm not really going to spend a whole lot of time talking about, I'm not particularly interested so much in what happens at the Daily Wire, unless the Daily Wire calls me up and says, DL, would you like to have a show? Then I might be interested. But it is the talk of the town. So, and I saw some things and I said, I thought this was interesting. So I figured I'd show you something. So Ben Shapiro, who is with the Daily Wire, was on the Piers Morgan show. Piers Morgan tried to ask him about this conflict because what happened? Candace Owens has left the Daily Wire. And a lot of people are speculating why. They're like, hey, what? Seems like it was right after she was pretty critical of Israel. And so is that what's going on? Or is there something else that's going on? Right? And it seems weird because her show is doing well. You would expect that if somebody's show is doing well, they're not the first person on the chopping block, right? Like that doesn't make any sense. Like, oh man, budget's tight. Guess we're going to have to get rid of one of our stars. Like that wouldn't make sense. So a lot of people have been kind of speculating. And so I thought this comment from Ben Shapiro with Piers Morgan was kind of interesting, especially when he butted up against something else. So let's play that clip.
One of the consequences of this war has been a lot of very high passions on both sides, a lot of angry disagreements. You and your company have been at the center of a very high-profile one at the moment with Candace Owens, who's now left Daily Wire. Was she fired, or did she leave of her own volition?
I'm not going to speak to this topic, Piers.
At all?
At all.
You can't give me any insight into why she departed?
No hints, no nothing. I'm not going to speak to this.
Can I ask why?
I mean, you can ask.
No, I'm not. You can ask why you don't want to say anything.
Again, you can ask.
I'm only curious because I know what a staunch defender of free speech you are. And it would surprise me if it had been someone's opinions that would make you want to part company with them. However contentious.
Suffice it to say, the only thing I will say is what I've said all along with regard to Candace or with regard to any of our other hosts. I am not in hiring and firing position with the Daily Wire. I'm a co-founder of the Daily Wire. I'm a co-owner of the Daily Wire. I'm not actually in management. Jeremy Boring and Caleb Robinson are in management positions with regard to Candace or anyone else. And as far as the free speech situation, what I will say is that no company has the obligation to literally pay anyone. The Daily Wire is a publisher. It is not a platform. I've never called for Candace or anyone else for that matter to be banned from YouTube, to be banned from X, to be banned from any platform. That's a different story. Obviously, when it comes to any publisher gets to make decisions about what it wishes to purvey and not.
I mean, I'm just not going to labor this, but one more point I would make is it's been reported extensively that the reason for her departure was because her comments have been perceived by people at the Daily Wire as anti-Semitic.
Again, I'm not going to comment on this, Piers.
Okay.
So, all right. So he's not going to comment on it, which is fine. Like, he doesn't have to, right? Like, he owes, like, I'm not a subscriber, so he owes me no obligation. You know, there's no obligation to me to tell me what's going on. I'm just somebody that casually might listen in every so often if I see something that might be of interest. And I will agree with him. No company has an obligation. And I think this is one of the things that we do need to keep in mind. We say the terms free speech, but free speech is between citizen and government, right? So like if I own, let's say that I had the Liberty Dad media empire. That sounds kind of good, actually. I kind of like that. But anyway, let's just say that I had the Liberty Dad media empire and I hired a whole bunch of journalists and writers and maybe some podcast hosts, you know, some celebrities, you know, some personalities and whatnot. There, I could say, I don't want you talking about this, period. My company. And it's not a violation of anyone's freedom of speech. Your freedom of speech is between you and government. Now, if the government were to come along and say, well, DL, you have this nice company here, and it turns out that so-and-so is saying a lot of things that we don't like, and you're going to have to stop that. Well, now that does become an issue of freedom of speech, right? That is certainly an issue because now the government is involving itself in the operations in some way. But unless that is happening, right, then it's not an issue of free speech. If, and I know people have speculated, like, well, what if they're getting money from like AIPAC or something? Okay, fine. If they're getting money and AIPAC says, look, we're going to give you a bunch of money. I don't know that this is true, but let's just work with me here. But let's just say that AIPAC or some other group, some other very pro-Israel, the state government group, were to give the Daily Wire a bunch of money and say, look, we just, these are the kind of opinions that we would like to hear from you, right? Again, not an issue of free speech, right? Like they can willfully say, here are the people, the investors. It doesn't matter whether it's AIPAC or whether it's just some, you know, investor that's what they do. They're an investor. They have tons of money and they stopped working. They've made their millions and now they invest and then they get a return, right? Same concept. It's just somebody that has said, here's this level of money, and this is what I would like in return for my money. It's purely a market decision, right? So I agree with him on that. Where I thought it was kind of funny is he said, well, I'm not in hiring. I'm a co-founder. I'm a co-owner. Okay, that makes you kind of important. But he's like, I'm not in hiring. Like I don't make those decisions, right? And that's a very nice way. Like in one sense, that's a nice fallback. Like, well, I'm not in hiring. What are you looking at me for? I don't have anything to do with it. So let me play this other clip. And you may have seen or heard about it, but apparently Ronna McDaniel, who was formerly the chair of the RNC, the Republican National Committee, she just had she was brought on board to NBC. And then I'm not even sure that she actually had even a single show or whatever she was going to be doing. I don't think she even produced one piece of content. before they let her go. So like she was hired and fired immediately. So let's play this interesting clip between Joy Reid and Rachel Maddow.
Our chairman of the NBC Universal News Group, Cesar Conde, who we both know very well, he sent a memo that we all got as employees here, rescinding the hiring of Ronna McDaniel. And I know I felt very strongly about it. I know you felt very strongly about it. I think everyone from 4 o'clock on, from Nicole all the way to midnight, we all felt very strongly and said so on our respective shows yesterday. And I just have to say, when somebody does the right thing, I feel like it should be acknowledged as publicly as we acknowledged our outrage. And so I know how I feel about it. I am grateful to Cesar for actually making the right decision. I think it was the right decision, but I want to get your take as well.
Oh, well, thank you for asking me about it. I still feel like a little. It always feels wrong to talk about things, in the company as if it's news. And it's just this. It's not the way either you or I are wired. I know, but I will just say that journalists are a fractious bunch. And in our big company with all sorts of different journalistic entities, you have all sorts of different people working in this business, doing all sorts of different kinds of work. And to see the essentially unanimous feeling among all the journalists in this building and all the sort of senior staff and all the producers and everybody in this building about this was one thing. But then to see the executives and the leadership hear that and respond to it and be willing to change course based on their respect for us and hearing what we argued, I have deep respect for that. I mean what I said on the air last night on my show, that I think that acknowledging that you might have gotten something wrong is a real sign of strength, a real show of strength. And I think it's a show of strength. And I think it's a show of respect for the people who work at this company and who make us who we are. That leadership was willing to change on this. And I'm grateful to them. It's not about hiring a Republican. It's not even about hiring somebody who has Trump ties. This was a really specific case because of Ms. McDaniel's and her involvement in the election interference stuff. And I'm grateful that our leadership was willing to do the bold, strong, resilient thing.
Okay. Wait. There we go. So over at MSNBC, they had somebody that was going to be a contributor. They were hired, a Republican, and then their employees made a stink about it and said, well, we don't like this person. We don't want to work with her for whatever reason. Doesn't matter. And then management said, okay, I guess we will unhire them. Let them go before they've even done anything. And then the host come out and they say, well, this is what happened. We played a role in that. That's interesting. That's very different than what Ben Shapiro said. Ben Shapiro kind of leads you to believe that he had no say in it whatsoever, right? Like, I'm not in management. I mean, I'm a co-founder and I'm a co-owner. I mean, those minor positions, but I don't have any say in that, right? Like, I'm not the guy that hires and fires people. Don't look at me. Really? So maybe Ben, as a mere employee who happens to be a co-founder and a co-owner, maybe Ben and others in the company went to their hiring manager and said, look, we obviously can't tell you what to do, even though we're the co-founder and co-owner. We have no authority in any way over you or, influence. But we think it would be a bad idea to keep Candace Owens. Maybe they said that. I don't know. Right? I mean, I'm speculating here. I mean, I could totally have it all wrong. It could be that like Candace walked into the office and gave them all the finger and kicked over stuff. I mean, who knows what happened, right? Like, I don't really know. But I do think it's interesting that it's kind of at the same time that Candace left the Daily Wire and nobody has any indication of what happened or why, that MSNBC or, NBC, they're kind of like, yeah, we let this person go because all of our employees don't like her. Right? Like, and the employees came out and said that. They came out like, how weird is it that NBC, MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, and Joy Reid appear to be more transparent about what's going on at their company, at least in this one particular incident, right? They're more transparent than the Daily Wire. Like, that's wild. and not because I'm like a right-leaning guy. Like I don't particularly care much for Ben Shapiro. Every now and then I'm like, oh, that's a good point. Um, but I that's probably, uh, let's see, that 1 minute clip of him, 1.5 minute clip. I don't, it's been weeks since I watched more than that. Like, I don't watch Ben Shapiro. In fact, I don't really watch very many podcasts. I see clips. And if I see a clip that's interesting, then I generally will go and try to dig up the whole thing so that I get a little bit more context. But as a rule of thumb, I generally just kind of, whatever kind of comes through my feed, that tends to be what I see. And I don't even always listen or pay attention to it. Sometimes I'll just scroll right on by. So, but but I have been very critical over the years of people like Rachel Maddow and Joy Reid for being explicitly dishonest. And then here I have to give them a little bit of kudos because they appear to be more transparent about what's going on with personality hires at their company than Ben Shapiro. Now, I didn't listen. I know that, maybe some more information was divulged. I did see a few clips from the spaces that was done by, was it Lauren Chen the other night? It's like I was going to listen to it, but it was like 3 hours. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not like, if I'm not listening live for I'm not, no. I don't have the time. I don't have 3 hours or an hour and a half if I put it on super speed, right? I don't have that kind of time. So I didn't listen to it. So maybe, I saw some clips where I think it was Jeremy Boring kind of came out and he didn't really explicitly say, but the way people phrased their questions and the way that he responded kind of people took as, okay, that's what you're basically telling us this. It's kind of like, do you beat your wife? I'm not answering. Okay, well, if you're like most people would say no. So therefore, since you didn't say no, right, that means you might. Right? Like it was those kind of questions, right? Where it's kind of like one answer would be would be easier to give if that were the true answer than the other answer, right? Like in the hypothetical that I gave there, and the analogy that I gave. If I ask you if you beat your wife, yes is almost always a good answer. Well, no, it's not almost. It's always a good answer, right? In this scenario, whereas no would not be a good answer. So you would be more inclined to say, wait a minute, did I get that backwards? Yeah, I think I got. Yeah, I got that backwards. No would always be the good answer, whereas yes would not be. So you'd be more inclined to say no. Um, and so when you don't say no, then it kind of leads people to believe like, oh, maybe the answer is yes. Now, alternatively, if you're being asked these kind of questions, another strategy might be just to answer vaguely or not at all to all of them, so that you force people to realize that you're not answering anything, which is kind of what Ben did. He was like, look, I'm not even going to talk about it. Sorry, you can ask that question, but I'm gonna, like, he was pretty tight lipped on that. However, once he started going into, I think the free speech got him, right? And so I thought that was kind of interesting. Make of it what you will. In my impression is that what Candace was saying played some level of a role in it. That's my impression. It could be the wrong impression, but at the end of the day, NBC, MSNBC appears to be more open about what's going on than the Daily Wire. So maybe the Daily Wire needs to work on some things. Anyway, let's move on. Talking about conspiracy theories. Yesterday we had the boat crash into the Francis Scott Key Bridge and just demolished it, right? And then of course, I mean it, like, barely a few minutes went by and just conspiracy theories all around, left and right. People were just certain of it. And I'm like, oh my God, people, like, you don't, like, I get it. We're all blowhards and we all want to talk about everything. And it's the big current news. And so everybody wants to chime in, because like if you don't chime in, then you're not really part of the conversation. It's like this FOMO thing, right? But at the same time, do we really need to go and talk about things so confidently? Like some of the same people that were talking so confidently about the conspiracy were also critical of the government speaking so confidently about what COVID would and would not do. Right? Like, we're basically doing the same thing. we as the community, not necessarily me, because I didn't, like, as I told one friend, we have an inflatable paddle, like inflatable little boat. I don't know if you would call it a boat, but like it's got like paddles and all that. And I take it out on the lake with my son, and I can barely paddle that thing straight. Okay, so like I'm not going to tell you about a barge slamming into a bridge because I don't know anything. Like I can barely manage, a small little inflatable boat. So I have no business telling you about that stuff. So I didn't really say much. Now, when I saw the video, yeah, it does look weird, right? Like you see the boat moving, and then all of a sudden, it like looks like it just takes this like sharp turn, and then just bashes right into the bridge, and the bridge just goes down, like whole thing goes down. And yeah, that's weird, but weird is not evidence, right? Like it is a weird thing to watch, but again, not evidence. And so what I was, some of the things I was finding kind of frustrated yesterday that people were just so, and there's like all these, and most when you look at them, conspiracy theories, most of these conspiracy, they rely on the idea of a question that cannot be immediately answered or satisfactorily answered, right? Like, but again, just because it's a question, just because it's weird, that isn't evidence. You need like now that might lead you to go digging, and that's cool. Like, fine. Like, I think we should always look and make sure because you never know. Did somebody hack it? Was it the CIA? Maybe, maybe not. Was it just some lone hacker, some teenager who managed to figure it out and was screwballing around and caused a big, huge problem? Maybe, maybe not. Was it just an accident? Maybe, maybe not. Like these are the kind of things. Did somebody fall asleep at the wheel? Did somebody not do their checks, their proper checks, and that they could have avoided the power outages? Like there's any number of different situations that could have happened, that have happened in the past. So I made this interesting comment. I think it's an interesting comment. I'm going to walk through it a little bit here. So Matt Walsh said, and let me put that up on the screen. Actually, I think we can do that. Give me just a second here. So let's see. There we go. Perfect. All right. There. All right. So Matt Walsh, he was like train derailments, supply chain crisis, planes falling apart in the sky, ships crashing into bridges. I don't know the cause of this latest catastrophe, but the overall picture is quite bleak. That's a fair comment to make. Like, I don't know what's going on here, but it's not looking good. On the other hand, here's what I pointed out, and we're going to walk through a couple things just so you know. All existing issues well before Matt and I were born. He's like 38, 39, something like 40. I don't know. He's a little bit younger than me, I think. Uruguayan flight 571, Malaysia flight 370, 911, CSX 8888, San Bernardino train disaster, Skyway Bridge over in Tampa, natural disasters, Deepwater Horizon, Colonial Pipeline attack, on and on and on. That isn't to say there aren't problems. Scroll that up. That didn't say there aren't problems, but those loudly concerned about the latest must explain how similar past events were not, quote, the big one, so to speak. The bigger problem, historically speaking, is being leveraged to create new laws and regulation. So this is my criticism. So I've got a couple criticisms of the liberty community that pushes these. Number one, you jump in on it so early. And I find that a little bit annoying because we're like the new media, right? We're not necessarily investigative journalists, but we're like the new media talking about things. Except for we're doing some of the same behaviors of the people that we replaced. We have this 24-hour news cycle that has to find stuff to fill. So they go and they make up controversies. They dig into stuff that doesn't matter. They make it a big deal, right? They beat dead horses, whatever the case may be. And then we go and do the same thing. We go and I've seen it. Like I've seen it in past incidents that we've observed where somebody, there's like a shooting and somebody's like, oh, I bet that person was a black guy because they didn't immediately say it was a white person. Okay. And then later it comes out that, yeah, the person was indeed black. And then they're like, see, I was the first one to say it. Like you are literally behaving just like the establishment media. And you're going down the very same path. Why don't we, as like new media, whether you're a podcaster, whether you're an investigative journalist, whatever you want to call yourself, right? Wherever you land in that, why don't we do things differently and say, you know what? I'm going to dig in first and then I'm going to show you what I uncovered rather than talk about it first and then hope that, some of my conspiracies land so I can later point to my tweet and say, well, look how soon I figured it out. No, look how soon you guessed. You guessed. You didn't know. You can speculate. You can make an educated guess, but you didn't know. And it's the same issue that we had with the media. And you're getting away with it in the same way because nobody's really holding you accountable. So we need to stop it. Like if you're one of my viewers or our listeners, an audience member for me, please hold me accountable and be like, DL, you didn't really know. Call me out. Say, DL, you didn't know. You jumped the gun on this. And I have a couple times, right? And a few times people have been like, DL, do you really know? Like, no, I don't. So just stop. Just stop it. And part of it is now, in fairness to all the creators out there, all the new media folk, if you will, in fairness, this is what people desire. So you got to stop being hungry. Like if you're making a demand for this kind of product, guess what? Somebody's going to supply it. And if you want something better than what you had, then you need to demand something different. You need to say, I don't need to know all your conspiracy theories that you think might have happened about this incident that literally happened, 1 hour ago. I need you to go in and search all the sources that you can find and come back to me with an educated opinion. Right? That's what you as an audience needs to do. Now, like, is that really going to happen? Maybe, maybe not. Like, it might be too late. That ship is, can I use that analogy? Whatever. That ship, that idiom, that ship may have already sailed. Okay. But if it hasn't, if there's an opportunity for audiences to say, we want something different, then now's the time. Now, as you have this new medium of information, exploding. Everybody's got a podcast, right? This is the time to say, like, no, hold on. I'm not interested in your speculation. I want to know what educated information that you can provide me based on the research that you've done. That's why I, as an audience member, wake up at 7 a.m. so I can listen to DL and hopefully he has done his research and homework and sat down and thought about it long enough to present me something that's not only interesting, but also he's not going to have to recant later and say, well, I guess I got that one wrong, or rely on my short memory so he can go, yeah, remember when I said this? I was totally right. No, let's not. How about I don't have to tell you how right I was because you remember, because I have such a track record of being right consistently, right? On the facts and the details that I don't have to boast about it because my work boasts for me. So I wanted to pull this up because, it is attractive though. I will say that, like, conspiracy theories are indeed attractive. So I wanted to take a look at just a couple things that I had mentioned and I want to point them out. Right. So let's put this up on the screen here. All right. So there we go. All right, so this is the so we're talking about the MV Summit Venture, which was a ship. You can see a picture of it over on the right there. 1980 Skyway incident. Summit Venture was involved in a fatal collision with the original Sunshine Skyway Bridge in Tampa Bay on May 9th, 1980. While negotiating a required turn in the narrow channel during a storm, the radar failed. Okay, so we have equipment failure. This is not uncommon, and the freighter struck one of the piers on the southbound span of the bridge. A 1,400 feet, somebody needs to edit that, 1,400 foot section of the steel cantilever highway bridge collapsed, causing a Greyhound bus, a truck driver, and 6 other vehicles to fall 165 feet into the bay. 35 people died, right? Now, I don't want to minimize what happened yesterday morning, but I believe 6 people died. Okay. So if you have this event in 1980, which took out a 1,400 foot section of the bridge, and I believe yesterday the bridge was 1,500 feet, if I got that correct, and I could be wrong on that. But this particular incident is substantial, right? And you had eight vehicles fall, 35 people die, and that didn't disrupt civilization, right? Because like that's the conspiracy. Like somebody's out there trying to disrupt our civilization. But incidents like this don't disrupt it. The Sunshine Skyway Bridge is back. It's repaired, right? I think it took like 7 years to put it back together. The Francis Scott Key Bridge will be back, whether they name it the same or not. I don't know. I assume they'll keep the name. I saw some people speculating that maybe it won't be. I don't know why you would do that, but whatever. But again, if this event wasn't, didn't disrupt our civilization, then why would we think that this one is the one, right? The one yesterday, because it looked a little weird on the video, right? Like that's the big difference is that as we go forward in society, we have access to more and more information. But again, it's the initial information tends to be incomplete because while we all got to see a video, maybe a couple videos of different angles, you didn't have anything about you had no idea what was going on the boat, right? Like you had no idea whether there was like nobody has done an inspection to go and look and say, okay, what exactly happened on this boat, right? Like nobody, like you didn't have that information, right? You don't know if somebody fell asleep at the wheel. I don't know if that's actually a thing because I don't, I don't sail boats. Okay, so I'm not a captain of a ship. I don't know how it works, but I would assume that there's an opportunity where maybe somebody can fall asleep or there's some negligence of a person at some point that could cause an accident, right? We don't know if there was negligence involved on part of a person, if there was an equipment failure, or if there was some malfeasance on purpose. We don't really know. And you didn't have that access yesterday morning when everybody was out there posting on it. All right, let's take a look at another one. I'm just going to kind of bounce through a couple different things just so you get an idea. This incident, the CSX 8888 incident, also known as the Crazy Eights incident, was a runaway train event involving a CSX transportation freight train in the U.S. state of Ohio on May 15th, 2001. Okay, this is 2001. Locomotive 8888 was pulling a train of 47 cars, including some loaded with hazardous materials or chemicals, and ran uncontrolled for just under 2 hours at up to 51 miles per hour. It was finally halted by a railroad crew in a second locomotive, which caught up with the runaway train, coupled their locomotive to the rear car. All right. So this train, and like you can see on this map, like the train's path is highlighted in blue. Like it goes from like Toledo here down down past Lima, right? And then let's see here. I'm gonna location. I'm trying to see if it gives you if there's like a quick well, okay, so I don't remember. I was trying to remember how far it went, but I thought I saw that it had went like 60 some miles or something crazy. Like it was something insane. Like it went 60 miles, and it had hazmat on there, and there was a big, huge concern. So you might remember that this incident inspired, as it says here, the 2010 movie Unstoppable. Remember the movie Unstoppable? It had oh, I can see his face, and I can't think of it now. I'm drawing a blank on it. You know what? I got the link here. We'll just click on it and we'll just take a look at it. Denzel Washington and Chris Pine. So that was an American disaster action thriller based on the real life incident, telling the story of a runaway freight train and two men who attempted to stop it. Right. Of course, it's embellished a bit because it's Hollywood. That's what they do. But they made a movie about it. And I just want you to think about the intensity of 47 train cars running up to 51 miles an hour. And if that had derailed in a town, it would have been a disaster. Possibly worse than the one we just had, I believe, also up in Ohio, right? And so these kind of things happen, and they've been happening. Malaysia, Airlines Flight 370. The plane just disappeared. No, but I don't remember that they ever even found the plane. They might have found a part or two, but they didn't find the people. They didn't find the plane, right? Like it just disappeared. And this happened in 2014, right? So you've got 1980, you've got 2001, you got 2014. These are some incidents, right? Another Malaysian airline. Okay, so you know what? Stay off Malaysian Airlines. Flight 17. This one was a flight from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur, and it was shot down by a Russian controlled forces. So it was shot down over eastern Ukraine. Like this was like, and how many? 283 passengers and 15 crew members were killed, right? So you had you literally 300 people. 300 people were killed when a military force shot down a commercial airliner, right? And this was in 2014 as well. Wait a minute. Both in 2014. Yeah, 2014. Malaysia was not doing very well in 2014, right? These things happen. And again, they're not disrupting our whole civilization. There's not a lot of conspiracy behind it. And see, that's the point that we want to try to make is that conspiracy theories are only good if you got some grand scheme that's in place. But it seems like these grand schemes never seem to play out, right? We have an event, people die, it disrupts a little bit or a lot, but not enough to give anybody like the kind of power that we present, right? It doesn't fulfill the conspiracy in total. And so if you're like, well, maybe these conspiracies, they just got to add up and eventually the WEF, Klaus Schwab, they'll have total control of global domination over the whole world. Well, I just went back to 1980. It's 2024. So 44 years later, right? And he still doesn't have global control. Like, do you see the point here that I'm making? Just that we have to be careful about what we assign these incidents. I'm going to get to why in just a moment. Let's look at a couple more. More. So we talk about like, I see a lot of people that are like, oh, look at this fire over at this farm. All these chickens died or all these cows died. You know what? Somebody's messing with our food supply. Well, again, this has been happening. Now, this one's a little bit on the newer side. So it says more than 500,000 U.S. farm animals died in barn fires in 2022. 500,000 farm animals died, right? And so what it says here, more than 518,000 farm animals have perished in barn fires so far this year, pushing the death toll to more than 6.3 million since 2013, according to Animal Welfare Institute analysis released today. These devastating numbers, which likely do not even represent the full scale of the problem, serve as an urgent reminder to the industry to prioritize fire safety and prevention on farms. So again, we go back to 2013 and we've got 6.3 million animals have died. Yet, name a time in America in your lifetime when large numbers of people went hungry because our food supply was so disrupted, right? Like by these fires. Now you can make arguments like some hurricanes and stuff like that cause some problems, but that's a natural disaster. So again, same concept. Unless you're going to be like, all right, well, they've got some sort of weather machine. There's a weather machine that caused the hurricane to come and hit, and so all these people, were killed and or died from from hunger or whatever, right? But you've got a lot of explaining to do if you want to make that case. And this explaining it never happens. All right. Last article here. This comes from the National Fire Protection Association, right? So it says conspiracy theory brewing over chicken farm fires is false, experts say. So this was in February of last year. First, it was fires in food processing facilities. Now, a seemingly growing number of people are claiming there's something suspicious about fires occurring at chicken farms across the United States. Here's Cat Turd. Sorry, Cat Turd. I got to call you out. Good morning to everyone except the evil demons purposely screwing with the food supply. All right. He said this in January of last year. right? Let's see. In an attempt to provide proof that something nefarious is afoot, people like Cat Turd, who has 1.3 million followers on the popular social media website, have pointed to incidents like a fire that killed 100,000 chickens at a farm in Connecticut on January 28th, and a fire in December that killed 250,000 chickens at a farm in Pennsylvania. These fires, the people allege, are most likely a government attempt at disrupting the food supply, leading to situations like the soaring egg prices that have gouged consumers' wallets in recent months. So let's go down here. The numbers don't lie. According to data included in a recent Fire Protection Research Foundation report on fires in animal housing facilities, an estimated average of 930 fires occurred annually in livestock or poultry storage properties, which includes spaces like barns, stockyards, animal pens in the U.S. from 2014 to 2018. On average, an additional average of 750 fires occurred annually in livestock production properties. Combined, that's more than 4 fires on average each day. 4 fires a day happen on average, right? So it does seem like there's a problem. And when you dig into the information, part of it is that there's a lot of the heating elements and equipment have failures. Presumably, maybe people aren't keeping up. Maybe they're not maintaining their equipment very well. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're using very old equipment, and it becomes more of a hazard than it once was. Whatever the case is. But again, they're right. The numbers don't lie. If there's an average, and I know what people think of averages, right? Like it depends on how things are plotted out, whether or not the average is very meaningful or not. But if an average of 930 fires have occurred from 2014 to 2018 every year, well, that's information you can go and look up, and you can go and research, and you can be like, all right, looks like there was about 900 in 2014 and in 2015 and 2016, 2017, 2018. And you can probably go back and you can probably look up information from earlier than that, right? So you can go verify and say, what does history tell us? Well, if history tells us that these occurrences, these kind of things happen on a regular basis, then what's the argument that this one is definitely the work of government, right? And why is that a problem for us? Why am I even making an issue to complain about it, right? Am I just griping at all my peers? No. I want to replace the media, the establishment media, with people that are doing better than the media, right? Now, it's fine to pursue an idea and say, man, something looks fishy here. Let's go digging. That's cool. And it's cool to maybe say, hey, I did all this digging and look what I found, some really weird occurrences. After you've done the digging, right? After you've researched and said, okay, I've accounted for the average of 930 fires at facilities between 2014 and 2018. I've accounted for that. So I know that there's going to be a large number of fires that are simply, faulty equipment, what negligence of people, whatever the case may be, right? You can say that and then turn around and say, now looking at this particular incident, here's why I think this one stands out from all the rest, right? Now that I've identified what's different about this particular incident, whatever this one is, than these other ones. But if you're not accounting for the other ones, then you're ignoring history and you're leading people astray and you're doing no better than the establishment media. And we might as well go back to them because at least they would sometimes usually post a correction, right? Like at least they had that much going. But I don't see a lot of people coming back and saying, man, like I don't see Cat Turd coming back and saying, you know how I claim this was totally the work of government? Well, I kind of got that one wrong. Sorry, guys. Let me post a retraction. I got that one wrong. Here's why, and here's how I'm going to make sure that I do better, so that the next time I make this claim, you'll be confident that I'm not being, lazy like I was the last time, and just, running through with, whatever I could say that will get some likes and clicks. So we need to be doing better, and it's especially critical in the liberty movement. The liberty movement, and I'm generally including mostly libertarians, but also some Republicans who may be liberty leaning. Maybe some Democrats too, if you're a liberty leaning Democrat, right? Like whatever, like whoever you are, if you're on the side of more liberty, not less, then you need to also argue and say, well, we need to do better because we're the underdog and there's a lot going on out there. And let's make sure that people, when they tune in, when they turn on YouTube or Rumble at 7 a.m., bleary eyed, just woke up from a really great dream, to listen to Liberty Dad talk, they should have confidence to know that I'm not just being lazy, that I'm doing my due diligence so that their time isn't being wasted. And so when I say I think there's a problem here, then I'm coming to you with some sort of facts and evidence, right? Some sort of argument that I've made based on, research that I've done. And if I'm not doing that, then you need to turn me off. And, you need to do the same thing for other, influencers and podcasters and the like. Do that as well. Tune out and say, you know what? If this is what you're going to offer, I might as well go to the mainstream media, right? I mean, why not? Because it sounds better coming from that person. They got a prettier face. Like, well, then what do you? Then do you really want more liberty for the world, or do you just want to be fed garbage, right? Like, there's a guy. I'm trying to think. Alan Roberts. Is it Alan Roberts? I think it's Alan Roberts. Let me just take a look here. I think it's Alan Roberts. Uh, yeah, Alan Roberts. Him and we follow each other. He goes by the MFing COO. And he's been on a tear lately about obesity and, like this epidemic of obesity. And he talks about, like, he'll show videos of somebody who's like proudly talking about how they eat themselves to death. And he's like, this is terrible. Why would you be proud of this? Right? Why would you be proud of stuffing yourself with a bunch of garbage and putting yourself into this situation? And he's not talking about people that got like an extra 10 or 15 pounds. He's talking about people that got like a large amount of weight. They're like 300 pounds. And they're not just like 300 pounds and like, hey, you know what, whatever, I'm just 300 pounds, deal with it. They're like 300 pounds and they're like, this is awesome. Fat is beautiful, so on and so forth. Accept me for who I am. There's no health problem. It's cool that I eat a box of Cheerios, whatever. Right. So he's grilling these people. We need to do the same thing. We need to be like, dude, why are you like, yeah, okay, maybe you're skinny and you're not eating a box of Fruit Loops every day. Right. But if you're eating a bunch of media that's garbage, you're doing the same thing to your mental health as obese people are doing to their physical health. You are no better. And so you should be better and want quality in the same way that you might gripe and say, hey, put down that box of Fruit Loops, pick up a piece of chicken and some broccoli, and then go take a walk. You should put down the garbage influencers that are coming to you without any kind of, and I'm not talking about people that have at least done research and said, look, I got some stuff backing my theory. I'm talking about people that are just throwing stuff out there, right? Just throwing out there and getting the likes and the clicks. And I'm not jealous. Okay. That's not it at all. Like, I'm happy that I do what I do and that what I'm delivering on. But you need to do the same thing. You need to do the same thing that you would be asking of the obese community for yourself, because your media consumption is obese and it's disgusting. So anyway, that's my rant on that. When I talk about something, I will do my best to make sure that I talk, with some level of confidence of the information that I have researched. And if I don't, which happens, then call me out. That's what I ask of my audience. Call me out and say, DL, this is not what I'm here for. I'm here for high quality stuff. Get your act together or I'll find someone else. That's how you get a better world. And if you're in the liberty movement and we want people to take us seriously, then we need to make sure that we can always be counted on to be accurate and right as often as possible. The more right you are, and I mean real right, not that you guessed it, like the real right. Like when I talk about COVID and I look back at some of my past tweets and comments and stuff like that, I'm proud of that stuff because I The reason I am right today is the exact same reason that I was right then. When I look back and I say, well, based on the data is telling me this, this, and this, and this, right? Therefore, I'm coming to this conclusion. And then now, years later, when we have more information out, more information has come out from all different sources, I can look and I can say, the reason that I was right then based on the data is the same reason that it holds true today based on the same data, right? Or more data, but basically that tells me the same thing, right? That's what we need to be in the liberty community. We need to be the kind of people that research it, and we were right then for the same reasons that we will be right later. And I don't have to go back and say, well, I didn't realize this, but it turns out it worked in my favor. No, every reason that I was right then is the same reason I'm right now, right? On like, say, the issue of COVID, when I was talking about like lockdowns and stuff like that, right? Those reasons are still applicable. There's no new information to add. There's no like, oh, well, it looks like Dio was right based on this new study of information that he didn't even know about. Nope. I mean, that might be true, but that's not relevant. I'm still right based on the old rationale. So that's what we should want in the liberty community. All right, let's move along here. Something local before we get out of here. So let's see here. So Florida passed a new law, and they actually modified it. Now, a while back, I did a podcast on the Republican legislature here in Florida going to pass a bill for online social media that if you're under 16, you couldn't have it. So let's play a clip here, a news clip. So apparently, we signed it. It's there. We'll see how it plays out.
Lawmakers acknowledge there are a lot more obstacles for parents these days. Kids used to just spend all their time outside. Now there's constant household arguments about digital devices and screen time. And some wonder if this new law will actually make any changes.
A playground is a great place to see kids just be kids.
Love ice cream.
Who doesn't?
You love ice cream?
Yeah.
I do love ice cream.
Ryan Hamlin is glad
son would say
3-year-old
the same.
Cora's number one concern is ice cream, but knows bigger worries are on the way the older she gets, like social media.
I think it's gotten kind of out of control, to be honest. I'm on it too much. But as far as like the
Aren't we
younger
all?
generation, they just need to get outside more. And
But is a new state law the right way to make a change?
as far as like regulating stuff, I don't really know how I feel about that.
Governor Ron DeSantis has signed House Bill 3 into law, banning children under 14 from having social media accounts on platforms considered to have addictive qualities. 14 and 15-year-olds need parent consent.
It's going to be hard, right? This is hard. They have made our parenting difficult by addicting our children.
But exactly what platforms are included and how they verify users and obtain that parent permission is not spelled out in the law.
Being buried in those devices all day is not the best way to grow up. It's not the best way to get a good education.
During the governor's bill signing, what was not mentioned, how the law would be enforced, but the social media platforms themselves would be held responsible.
There's no bill powerful enough to keep these kids from social media. It's not possible.
Parents tell us they feel the control needs to be in their hands.
Too much with technology, and it's hard. It's really hard. That's all they want to do.
I know.
And unfortunate.
Yuli Cudiero brought her 9-year-old Samantha to enjoy the fresh air on her day off of school.
I don't think that you should be in Facebook and Twitters and all that stuff. They're too young for that. And I'm trying to control, with her friends, what she does and who she's friend with, it's dangerous.
She doesn't mind a law to help remove her daughter's online presence.
I would cancel her account. Yeah, I will. But she knows she has to be very responsible. And that's why I take her to the playground today. I said, let's just go to the playground, just go for ice creams, my day off too.
Spending time together instead of in front of a screen. Stephanie Suskind, WPTV, News Channel 5.
All right.
Thanks for watching.
So, get that little tidbit in there. All right, so let's talk about this, and then I'm gonna play something from a local school board member here that was at that signing that Ron DeSantis did. So, parenting is hard, and it has always been hard, and there's always something that parents got to watch out for. So like when I was younger, it was actually the internet. Like if you're one of the olds like me, you remember the AOL chat rooms. You jump in there, and if you had any semblance of a female name, every guy in there would be like A/S/L, right? Age, sex, location, right? Yeah. ASL, basically age, sex, location. That was the question. This is what I want to know. How old you are you a man or, you a guy or a girl? And then where are you? Right. Everybody was trying to hook up. Like it was just like, I don't know if anybody actually ever hooked up, but that was, but there were predators then. Right. There are predators, at the gas station, at your church, at your, your local, whatever, community center, whatever. There's predators everywhere. Right. And I'm not saying that to be like alarmist, like, oh my God, there's predators everywhere. What I'm saying is like, not like they are literally everywhere, but in every facet of life, there can be found a predator potentially. Right. And then there are just random things that kids do. They get in trouble in any number of ways, right? They go and they shoplift or they, whatever. They're all that's kids, and kids might as well be Latin for get into a lot of trouble, right? Like it might as well be. And so it is very difficult. And I think a parent's job is just never ending. I do oppose the bill, and you might, if you didn't see my show on it. You can go look up 255 Florida Republicans versus free speech, where I talked about that bill. Now, I actually talked about a prior bill that actually got rejected, and then they came back. So that was an old, but I think I haven't done a review of the newer bill that did get passed. I think the big change was that it made an exception for, like, parents could give an exception for 14 and 15-year-olds. So I think that was the big deal. But I think otherwise, pretty much all the elements in there. So my bill review should still be pretty accurate for the bill that actually got passed. But you can go and check that out. I was opposed to it because, like, at the end of the day, it's my job as a parent to figure things out. In the past, I did a bill review on, I can't remember the name of the bill, but basically it was going to try to force furniture manufacturers to prevent tipping. It was like an anti-tipping bill. And so the gist of it was like, let's say that you have a tall standing dresser drawers, and the kids could open the drawer and try to climb up of it on top of it, and then the whole thing could fall over on top of them and seriously harm them. Right. So they were like, hey, look, we need to do something about it. We need to force manufacturers to do something. And then I just came out and I said, my mom, who was not a legislator, who was not like an engineer or any kind, she was just a regular housewife. My mom had a pretty ingenious solution. She went and got an eye hook. She screwed it into the wall. She screwed the other end into the drawer, and then she hooked it. And then bam, it wouldn't fall over anymore. Right. So like the idea that, like, we need to get away from this idea that somehow parenting is super duper hard today compared to it was yesterday. It's always hard. I look at my parents, and I gave them a lot of trouble. Right. And it when I was younger, video games, that was a big deal. Like, oh no, video games, if your kid plays too many video games, it's going to rot their brain. Or if they play the violent video games, they're going to turn into a psychopathic serial killer. Right. That really didn't happen at all. Then it was, before that it was music. Like, oh no, we need a parental advisory on music. And like, I'll tell you a funny story. And then we're going to get to this local person. I tell you a funny story. So I was at a park with a friend with my mom, and I was probably like 13 or 14, somewhere around there. And actually, I met a guy, and he was letting me listen to his Walkman. Now, if you're younger, if you're like 25 and you're like, what's a Walkman? That was back in the day, we had this thing called a tape, and it was like a square, and it literally had like a magnetic tape inside of it that scrolled from one side to the next. And then you had like the little, I'm probably not doing a good job with my hands, but then it had a reader, and you could listen to music on it, and you would put it in, and then you could have all the, you had like side A and side B. And so my friend had a tape, and it was by Digital Underground, and it was called, the name of their album was Sex Packets. And so what he did when my mom came over, she was like, well, what are you guys listening to? And he put his thumb over the word sex and he's like, oh, it's just this cool album called Packets, right? Like we did these kind of things. Like we got away with a lot. Like my kids are sneaky. They do these kind of things. Like that was probably one of the easiest, the simplest things that I had ever done to sneak and get around stuff. So parenting is hard, right? And then you have to be constantly vigilant. Like I went through all our devices and I set up YouTube Kids for my son, so I could better monitor, which I was already monitoring his YouTube experience. I would, peek over and double check what he's watching while he's watching it. I would sometimes go back and I'll periodically go back through the history just to double check what he's watching, just to make sure that I didn't miss anything when I was, busy working or something like that. I limit his screen time. So he's only allowed to have a certain level of screen time. So I do these things. We pay attention to who he plays with. And it's relatively easy now. He's 5, when he's 15, it'll get much more difficult. So it is difficult, but I don't think that assigning a responsibility to the government really helps. In fact, I think it might actually hurt. So let's listen to what April Carney. So April Carney is a local school board member. And as a bit of history, I'm the chair of the Libertarian Party here in Duval County. We invited April to come and speak before she got elected. And we're like, hey, let's just hear what you got to say. She was challenging the current school board member, and she won. She was at the time, I believe, an activist with Moms for Liberty, or she's at least very connected with Moms for Liberty. So I just want to put that out there, that we did bring her in. We are not partisan specific to her as a political party. We have brought in a lot of people from the right and the left. It just so happens that she was from the right, that we brought in because we were curious what she wanted to challenge with. So let's hear April Carney. Now, this is at the signing where Governor DeSantis, he signed the bill, and then they had a bunch of different speakers, and Mrs. Carney was one of them. So let's listen.
All right, April Carney, Duval County School Board.
So this will be about 4 minutes, and I'm going to interject from time to time. So just.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to ask you all to give me some grace this morning because I do not want to embarrass my 13-year-old that's sitting in the audience.
So I just want to tell future Liberty Son, do not expect such graciousness. I will probably try to embarrass you on purpose. Just throwing that out there, so you might as well get used to it now, son, future son. So just, it is what it is.
But you all know me as school board member, but like everyone else that's speaking today, my first role here is mom. And so today I would like to speak candidly with you about our experiences as a family, having 2 teenage daughters, 13 and 18, and the struggles that we've gone through with devices. So I'm the mean mom. I'm the drill sergeant. I'm the one that takes the phone at night. I'm the one that says, put it down, look at me in the eye, put it down, do your schoolwork, put it down. What are you looking at? What are you looking at? Who are you talking to? Over and over and over again.
Okay. That is exactly what a parent should be doing. Every single parent, if you are a parent, that right there is your job, to do just that, and know your child will not like it, but that's your responsibility, right? Like I remember, quickly just telling you a quick story. I didn't have internet on my phone because I didn't have a phone when I was like 16, but I wanted to sleep over at a friend's house. And my mom was like, what's his number? And I was like, why? And she's like, I want to call and talk to his mom. So she called and she was like, are there any guns at your house? Are you going to be home? What are they going to do? When are they going to bed? And she just asked him a barrage of questions. And it was quite frankly embarrassing. And when I talked to my friend, like the next day at school, he was like, yeah, dude, my mom does the same thing. And we just kind of laughed about how embarrassing it really was. Like your mom was like calling up and just asking all these like intrusive type questions to somebody else's parent before they would let you come and sleep over. And I was like 15 or 16. I think I was like 16. All right.
I'm not well liked by my kids because of that. It's too bad. So
it is too bad.
I can tell you now, or 5 months away from sending our oldest away to college, and I'm absolutely terrified that she's going to meet somebody on Snapchat that she doesn't know, that she thinks she knows, and leave her dorm room and never come back. Just last spring.
Okay. So let's stop here for just a second. Now, I am not going to chime in. Like, I know a lot of people would be like, oh, well, you probably didn't raise your child right. For no, I think it's perfectly reasonable for a parent to be terrified to let their child go, the child that they've had for 18 years in their house, and they've been able to monitor and keep tabs of, and now you're letting your child, your flesh and blood, go out into the world. Yeah, that's I can see that's a little scary. And if I'm going to be a little bit patriarchal, I can see it being a little bit scarier for a woman in many cases, not always, but in many cases, right? So I think this is perfectly reasonable. It's reasonable to have this fear. Continue.
I had the opportunity to visit the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Division, ICAC, which is the Internet Crimes Against Children Division. And I spent the entire day with these officers who fight tooth and nail to make sure that our kids are not being trafficked by predators through social media. They are a small but mighty team. And what I can tell you is that day changed me forever. I thought I was vigilant before. I became even more vigilant now. He showed me how he could take Face app. This is an officer in his mid-40s, bald, typical looking dad, and within morphed himself into a 15-year-old girl, and then proceeded to log in to a social media app and start a chat. First thing he said within 15 seconds was, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm 15, send me a pic." Child writes back, "You send me your pic." He sends the 15-year-old morphed image of himself, and she sends back another picture of herself. Within 30 seconds, this predator could have engaged with your child and then started a conversation, thinking that they're talking to another 15-year-old. So I'm terrified about that.
Okay. I don't begrudge anybody for being terrified, but I will say I think this is an extreme situation that you probably shouldn't keep on your front burner or your back burner. You should probably put it a little further back. It's not to say that it doesn't happen, right? Like, these kind of things do happen, but I don't think they happen nearly as frequently as people like to believe. I mean, we have this inflated sense of how frequently this happens. And remember, the idea of stranger danger is not new. There's always been the concern of strangers. When I was growing up, it was like, oh man, if you meet a stranger, they're probably going to try to molest you, right? But it turns out that's actually not even true. Most of the time, predators are somebody that the child knows. It's not usually somebody that they don't know, right? This, in my opinion, this fear that your child's going to meet somebody online that's pretending to be a 15-year-old, which does happen. Like, there's like a group of guys that go out and they catch these predators, and it does happen. But I feel like, based on the frequency at which this actually ends up fully playing out, right? Not somebody just trying to say, hey, send me a pic, you send me a pic. Like, it plays out from start to finish. You trade pictures, and then your child ends up in the hands of some, Chester that needs to meet an untimely demise. Those situations, I don't believe, are any more frequent than they used to be, right? And again, like, I could be wrong, but when we look at the data, we see that a lot of our fears are not based on data. They're based on the scariness of stories like this. So I'm going to say these kind of stories, the fear that they generate, is about the same as Lifetime movies when I was growing up. Remember Lifetime movies? Where, like, it was like every movie was some deranged husband or ex-boyfriend that was out to get the woman and her kids. And she had to, like, travel across the state, go through some heroic effort to save her children, right? Made for good movies. And it scared a lot of women. And we were like, oh my God, your crazy dad could be that. But then it really wasn't. Like, it happened occasionally. There were some news stories. I mean, there's 300 million people in America. Like, these things do happen. But when you look at per capita, or when you look at percentages, all of a sudden there's not really a good rationale for that fear. So I think I think we're getting into fear mongering territory here. Yes, somebody could do that. How many of them are also police officers trying to catch somebody, right? Or trying to show a mom how scary it is, right? Like, I mean, and that was kind of weird anyway. Like, I kind of question why an officer would do that. So, but whatever the case is, I think we need to be diligent that, again, this is like in some ways conspiracy theory, right? It does happen. We have cases where it does happen, but it's not so prevalent that everyone lurking behind a screen is a predator out for your child.
18-year-old going away who we have been fighting addiction for the last 6 or 7 years.
And by the way, I just want to point out, an 18-year-old is not a child, and they can meet whomever they want. You may not want them to. I mean, I'm sure when my son's 18, I'll be like, boy, you better stay away from some of those, those unsavory people, right? Like, so I'll be there. So I get it. And I understand that there's more of a concern with the daughter, but let's be clear, 18 is an adult. And that means you can go places that a child cannot go. So you don't even need the internet to meet unsavory people.
She's been cyberbullied. She has lost sleep. Her sleep cycle is upside down. She has issues with eating. She has confidence issues. She's always comparing herself to other girls. And it's gotten to the point now where, she's an adult. She's 18. And my husband and I have to say, okay, well, you're going to have to learn how to self-regulate.
Absolutely. You got to learn how to self-regulate because it's time for you to fly out the nest. Now, I want to be careful not to criticize her family. So I'm going to try not to do that. And if it comes across that way, then please know that that's not what I'm doing. I'm just simply trying to utilize her conversation since it's a public conversation. She is a public servant and we are talking about legislation. I'm trying to utilize that to make a point. So the things that she described happened to my sister. Maybe not, maybe not as drastic. I don't know to what degree, and to many other girls when they were growing up. They had self-confidence issues. They would go through a period where maybe they didn't want to eat, right? Or they would, eat very skimpy, because they were concerned about how they looked, would the boys like them, so on and so forth. They had trouble sleeping. They got into it with other girls. I mean, remember when I was growing up, Mean Girls was a popular movie based on this notion that girls are pretty vicious to each other, right? These things happened long before social media. So again, very much like the conspiracy theories, if you're going to say now is somehow different, you need to explain how now is different than times before and why. You can't just say, oh, we've got this problem and all these things are happening. Yeah, they've been happening. That doesn't necessarily warrant legislation. That just means that, hey, looks like we have an issue that needs to be dealt with. And then if we look at it historically, we can go, well, looks like this issue has existed for a very long time. Like, I remember it when I was a child. My parents probably remember it when they were a child, so on and so forth, right? And the mechanism for these things happening just happens to be different, right? Today it's the internet. Yesterday it was video games. The day before that, not like a single day, but the time before that, it was music. Before, like remember the Elvis Presley and oh my God, the devil's music. And what are we going to do about it? He's ruining all of our young, good Christian girls and boys, right? Like these things have happened time and time again. And it's just something new that is part of the quote unquote problem. Let's continue on.
We're going to have to be able to do this on your own. And I can tell you that as a parent, I am truly terrified. I really am. And I am so thankful that in the state of Florida, we have a state legislature and we have a commissioner of education and we have our great governor that understands the rights of parents and understands that we can't do this alone and understands that we are in charge of our children's upbringing, not big tech, not Snapchat, not Instagram, and definitely not TikTok. And they are giving us the power to make sure that we raise our children in a way that we see fit and that our children are not indoctrinated by these algorithms that are showing up 24 hours a day on our kids' phones. So as a parent, as a school board member, I am going to be putting forward policy here in Duval County that we no longer allow cell phones during the day, and that will be coming forward this year. And I could not be more proud to serve under this great governor and this wonderful state legislature that fights for our kids every day. Thank you.
All right. So I have no particular beef with April. I like her as a person. I can't speak to the job that she's doing on the school board because I haven't really paid closely attention, but I will say that I disagree with the tail end there. I don't believe that, that our government is empowering us, because what does the bill do? It says if you're under 16, you cannot have a social media account unless you're 14 or 15 and your parents give you permission. That's like, what if I want my 13-year-old to have an account? What if I want to teach my 13-year-old or my 12-year-old how to responsibly use social media? What if I tell them, all right, look, you can't have a social media account until you're 12 years old. When you're 12, then you can have a social media account. And then we're going to work through how you behave on a social media account in the same way that we work through everything else, right? Because everything, what is a child doing? They are learning responsibility. Who do they learn it from? They learn it from their parents. But if the government has stepped in and said, well, parents, I'm sorry, your kid can't do this. Well, then now I don't have control. And then now I have a situation where my child isn't learning early on, and it may actually be more of a problem later. So let me tell you one final story before I close. And I'm going to have to close here because we're getting a little bit late. I had a buddy. He went to Bible college, and this was years and years ago. And he said, do you know who are the wildest ones at Bible college? And at the time I was like, no. Now, whenever I tell a pastor this, they immediately know the answer. He said, pastor's kids, hands down, every single time. And I was like, really? Pastor's kids? Like, why would, that doesn't even make sense. Pastor's kids are always good. He said, because they were raised so strictly that they didn't learn how to make good decisions early on. So then they get out in the world and they're bombarded with all these decisions that they have to make all of a sudden. And then they just make all the bad ones because they never learned to make bad decisions in the first place. Okay. And so I think this is kind of what this legislation does. Now, is it a good idea for a 12-year-old to have Twitter account? Probably not. Like if my son were 12 right now, would I want him on Twitter? No. Right. Would I want him on Facebook? I'd probably be okay with it, I guess. I don't know. But again, what if I wanted him on there? What if I said, all right, look, son, I've been on Twitter a while. I know the ropes. I've been on Facebook. I've been on, all these different social media platforms. I kind of get the gist of social media and what it's about. So let me help you so that you don't become addicted like all the other adults are, right? Let me help you learn how to regulate. And maybe we can even learn how to make a business of it, right? So you can actually make some money, right? And I'm now restricted from that. I can't do that because we have just a little bit more nanny state. And so this is my beef with that tail end part. Like, no, I don't think that the government understands that. Like, yes, do parents need a little bit of an assist? Sure, I agree with that. That's why you have friends. That's why you have your church group, so on and so forth, right? Like, I talk to people sometimes and they tell me about their experiences and I go, oh, let me check that out. Like on a previous podcast episode, I talked about how my son was walking around talking about Skibbity Doo. And I was like, I don't know. I thought it was just something from Minecraft that we hadn't encountered yet. And because he only watches Minecraft videos. Well, as it turned out, it comes from Skibbity Toilet, which is some bizarre series that he's never seen. But somebody had ported that into Minecraft. You know how I found out about it? On social media. Somebody made a big long post of it and they said, hey, a lot of young people are watching this series called Skibbity Toilet. And I was like, that's the same word my son uses. So I read through it and I checked it out. I watched the video. I watched some video or one video. I watched one Skibbity toilet video. And then I went back and I found the Minecraft video that he watched, which was far, far less creepy and weird. It was just normal, right? So that's how I was able to be a better parent, is by information that somebody else was able to provide me, by being on the lookout. My wife is part of a mom's group, and they get together sometimes and they talk about things, right? And like specifically, and she learns a lot. And other people with other kids, that are older, younger, whatever, they talk about their experiences and so on and so forth. And so they learn from each other. Having a community is how we be better parents, not by having legislation. I don't foresee this social media ban improving our children's lives any more than parental advisory stickers did back in the 90s. Just don't see it. You know why? Because in the same way that my friend held up that cassette deck and he covered over the word sex so he could show my mom what we were listening to, and she thought we were listening to an album called Packets, by Digital Underground. In the same way that he was able to conceal that, some child will be able to conceal how they're still using social media from their parents, right? And we are going to get a false sense of security. So, no, I'm not in support of this ban whatsoever. I'm not even sure that it would be interesting to see how they even enforce it, but I think it is absolutely making us worse parents, because now we feel this level of safety that doesn't exist. So we are not going to be more diligent in that area. I will, but many parents will not, because they'll be like, oh, well, kids can't get on social media anyway. How did they come up with that idea? How did my son do this crazy thing? Where did they learn that? Well, that's because we were lulled into a false sense of security. All right. Let's see what we got here. Let's see. Good morning, DL. We should talk. I should always talk with somebody. Reach out. We'll talk. But if it's about RFK, not gonna be a good conversation. Let's see. Keith Garrett says, good day, Hector and DL. Good day. Good day, sir. Let's see. There it is. Hector Roos, Walkman, literally boomers, iPad. Yes, that's what it was. It was an iPad. It was like the boomer version of iPads. And our parents were like, how do you figure this thing out? Right. And then today we're all like, how do you figure out this iPad? How do you figure out this social media? Right. Just everything that's happened before will happen again. All right, folks, hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you found it informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel. You can go to, or my Rumble channel. You can go to youtube.libertydad.com. You can also go to rumble.libertydad.com. Let me know how I'm doing. Leave me a comment. I do check them out. Sometimes I try to respond if I can. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.